Okay, so continuing with our series on interstellar travel, today I'm going to talk about warp speed and hyperspace. Sound like things that were just made up for science fiction. Possibly they were, but you go online and you look them up, and there are quote unquote theories about them, and whether these are fan theories or whether these are um, actually scientific, I don't know. Some of them could be that science fiction writer came up with an idea and then scientists look at it and said, "This is cool. How would this work?" Others could be a scientist came up with an idea and a science fiction said, "I'll incorporate this in my book." So I don't know for sure where it started, but I'm just going to talk about both of them. So hyperspace is, according to the internet, like I said, searched a few sites which agreed, but I don't know if this is where they had originated. You're actually entering another dimension. And in this other dimension, the laws of physics are different. And so you can move faster than the speed of light. Um, another way of looking at this might be that laws of physics aren't necessarily different, but the dimensions of this other dimension are different, or space is different. So step into this other dimension, take 2 steps, come back into our dimension, and I've moved 500 miles away. That's just my addition to this, just because. So, how do you get into hyperspace? And according to a few sites, I said you have to travel faster than the speed of light in order to enter hyperspace itself. So, okay. In order to reach the dimension which allows you to break all the known rules of science that we know about, you must first break all the known rules of science that we know about. We don't know how to travel faster than the speed of light. That's the whole purpose of going into hyperspace, is we don't know how to travel faster than the speed of light. So having to travel faster than the speed of light in order to enter hyperspace sort of, creates the same problem. Now, another problem is, how do you navigate through hyperspace? So Star Wars, it's like, we're gonna make the hyperspace jump. Gotta go and do the computer stuff. We've entered hyperspace. Let's go back and play Star Wars chess until we're ready to exit. Sounds good, except how does computer do all this? I mean, we are dealing with laws of physics unlike anything that we are used to. So how do you program a computer with these laws of physics? Might be possible. At the same time, hyperspace sounds like the type of place where you have to divide by zero, which computers don't like. So I guess depending on how much we learn about hyperspace depends on whether or not we can actually program a computer to navigate it. Outside of that, manually navigating might be possible, but the guy would have to be very smart to do it, just because we're dealing with laws of physics that we aren't used to using day to day. It would definitely take some mental gear shifting to go from normal space into hyperspace without getting confused. Now, the other option then is warp drive. And here we're getting into the Star Wars versus Star Trek. So warp drive, how does that work? It's got the word warp in the title, so something's being warped. And the theory is you are creating a bubble of warped space around your ship. So very localized warping going on here. And somehow you're moving within the bubble, you're moving at normal speed, but the bubble itself is moving faster than the speed of light. Which, again, sounds almost like, okay, now we've got something moving faster than the speed of light, which isn't supposed to be possible. Okay, so what's happening is space in front of the ship is being compressed and space behind the ship is being elongated. So in front of the ship, a million miles of space has been reduced down to 1 mile. So we travel 1 mile and we're actually traveling a million miles within the real universe, or outside the bubble, however you want to put that. And then the space behind us, like I said, is being elongated, so it's basically making up for the fact that we've traveled, you know, a million miles. Unless there's a way to reverse the bubble, you can't go backwards in warp speed, which, again, no real reason to. You aren't going to have any fights or anything where you have to withdraw. But my question now is, how far out does this bubble actually extend? Like I said, my example, I said a million miles to compress down to 1 mile. Um, sure, I'll accept that. As long as another ship does not pass within a mile of my ship, or within a million miles of my ship, depending on how we're going to look at it. Because anyone passing within this warped space is going to get caught up in my warp bubble, and it's really going to mess with them. You know, so we get back to the whole navigation problem again, and in this case, it's navigating our ship's fairly simple because we're treating everything as if we are within, um, normal space. With the people outside our space, we know where the planets are. We know where the stars are. We can program around that. We don't know that a ship has just launched and it's going this direction and it's going across our path. So when we go and our warp bubble hits this ship, who just happens to be traveling, in front of us, what's going to happen to them? What's going to happen to us? Are we going to suddenly, have this thing appear in front of us, and are we going to crash into it? What would it be like? Would a crash in warp speed space be worse than a crash in normal space? Because suddenly we are going from moving faster than the speed of light to moving normal, from one perspective. From another perspective, we aren't. It's we've got this with the perspective within the warp bubble and the perspective outside the warp bubble, and so how do you deal with that? Again, I will give Star Trek credit, is they didn't just launch from a planet, break orbit from a planet and immediately go into warp. They traveled for a while and then went into warp because it makes sense that you don't want to go into or out of warp too close to another planet. They did go into and out of warp close to other ships, though. So again, the question is how far out did their warp bubble reach, and how much damage were they doing to these other ships when they did this? One of those things they didn't think about when they wrote the scripts, I don't think. Who knows, a scientist who has actually studied relativity more than I have might come out and say it's very possible to have a very small warp bubble which will still allow you to travel great distances. And like I said, relativity is a weird thing. You can do stretch and bend space like that. The creation of the bubble itself is questionable. So relativity, if you move close to the speed of light, things start happening like distances change and time changes and stuff like that. So that's sort of how the theory behind how warp works. But creating the bubble, we are spontaneous. We're not moving at the speed of light now, but we are creating a bubble around us with all the effects of as if we were traveling at the speed of light. So, or close to the speed of light. So suddenly, all of our, again, this bubble is created as if we are already in relativity, or something like that. So it seems somewhat unlikely. Now, of course, talking about warping space and all this leads us, of course, to wormholes, which I'm going to talk about in the next video, and that'll be my last video on interstellar travel until someone comes up with another idea. But until then, have a good day.